Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a couple of books. I'm going to review them separately, but they are really come together in my mind 100 years after the execution of Major Herbert Armstrong. The two books are The Hay Poisoner and The Poisonous Solicitor, which has just been published. What I'm going to do is look at the books separately, and then you can make your own mind up about what you think. Let me deal first of all in this review with The Poisonous Solicitor. That's been written by a man called Stephen Bates. It's an important book in many ways. It's a hardback. You can see the front and you can see the spine and the back. There's some photographs, of course, all the usual types of photograph in the middle. You can see a number of people who are mentioned there. You can see the back of the book. There's a picture of the author. It's a very good book. I found it very interesting. You've got a lot of relatively short index and quite a lot of notes. And then you've got various comments right at the back. There's an acknowledgement at the back of the book rather than at the front. Then there's a bibliography looking at the various books that he's actually referred to. And then you're looking at, again, quite a large number of different people who he's used as sources. Then you get the body copy of the book itself. We go to the front, you can see some information there. He just calls it a brilliant narrative investigation into the 1920s case that inspired Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers and Margery, Allingham. That's what his view is anyway. There's the front page, and then there's a nice little dedication. We only review books that we like. A lot of work goes into these books, and I do like to let people know. You can see the contents section, just numbers of chapters, total of 21 chapters in all, then the bibliography, acknowledgements and so on. Details about Stephen, and then it goes into the foreword, which is worth reading just to get a picture of where everything is. Then we go straight into chapter 1. You can see there are some quotes that he brings in. He's trying to give a feel for what it was like 100 years ago. And you do get some little notes occasionally, footnotes. Not that many, but there are the occasional ones. Then you do, as I say, have the photographs all the way through. The book runs to something like 320 odd pages, or about 350 in total. I found it an interesting book. It's available as a Kindle book and also available as an Audible book. And I found the Audible book very interesting to listen to. Well, what do I say about the book? Because this book has been reviewed. People have made some comments about it, and I'm not really going to say anything to spoil it. The storyline is straightforward, and so I've given the title of the review A Modern Retelling of the Judicial Execution of Major Armstrong. He was a solicitor and a member of the armed forces. The book itself really doesn't come down strongly one way or the other. I think many people will have fairly strong views, possibly today, about what happened 100 years ago. He was executed on the 31st of May 1922, and I'm recording this just after that. I've actually been to Hay on Wye, and I've visited the places as well. So I've got a good idea of the feel between the English and the Welsh of some of the problems and some of the difficulties, because there are lots of allegations even now, and certainly today it's pretty unlikely that Armstrong would have been convicted, and of course he wouldn't have been executed, because we've stopped that sort of thing, thank goodness. Anyway, the book, The Poisonous Solicitor, has been described in the following way. A brilliant narrative investigation into the 1920s case that inspired Christie, Sayers and Allingham. Quite a statement here because of the facts, which are of course true and not fictitious, and the participants in this tragedy of course are now all dead, including his children. And I have to say that there are always going to be victims in these cases, irrespective of anything else. And of course the children were the victims. And it was a bleak Tuesday morning, this is how the book describes it, in February 1921, that a 48-year-old lady called Catherine Armstrong died in a bedroom on the first floor of an imposing Edwardian villa which overlooks the rolling hills of the isolated borderlands between Wales and England. Actually, Hay is not the easiest place in the world to get to, and it is actually quite nicely building up the idea of where the place is and how even now because it's right on the border, you do have a certain element of clashing, not very much these days, but there certainly was, I think, more between the Welsh and the English. 15 months after this sad domestic tragedy, that's the death of Catherine, her husband, who's styled as Major Herbert Armstrong, would then be arrested. Obviously he was known to many people because he was a local solicitor. He was tried and then hanged for poisoning her with arsenic, and he's, as I say, the only solicitor ever to have been executed in England. Now, his story has been told and retold again and again, decade after decade, and it's actually, in many guises, part of it appears in different stories. There's been a television series about it starring Michael Kitchen, which was excellent. There have been a lot of articles in the newspapers. The bibliography is incredibly meticulous, and it's also inspired probably a new breed of popular detective writers seeking to create a cunning criminal at the centre of their thrillers. That's probably because they all spend their little weekend at the old Swan in Harrogate swapping stories about how to write crime novels. And I'm not belittling any of them, because it's great to swap ideas. And of course, as I've said many times in my reviews, a lot of what we get as fiction is actually all based on fact, because it's based on people's experiences. And of course you twist it to set your own marketing scene for what you're writing about and how you want to put forward a story. So what you've got here are all the ingredients, of course, of a classic murder mystery. The book is worth reading, it's very easy to read. The case is a, quote, near perfect whodunit. And in fact, who did it? Did Armstrong really commit the murder? Was he a murderer? These are questions which actually remain with Stephen Bates' book. They remain, in my view, unanswered, and he doesn't really come down on a very strong side either way. The difficulty is that on a balance of probabilities, perhaps he did it. But in terms of beyond reasonable doubt, I think there are very serious questions to be raised. However, when you've executed someone and after 100 years, all you can do is look at it really from a standpoint of an academic point of view, because over 100 years ago, after he was hanged, obviously Agatha Christie and all the other people have had very useful cases like Armstrong and like many other ones to write their stories, and they do refer to Dorothy L. Sayers as well. I have to say, I don't know that Dorothy would have approved of any of that. I don't think she got her stories in that way, because I've always found Dorothy's work, quite a lot of it, to be autobiographical in many ways. But what we've got here is the author, Stephen Bates, and it's a non-fiction book. This he examines and retells the story of the case, evoking the period, and that comes out with the quotes at the beginning of each chapter. And you get to the atmosphere of the period, of the early 1920s, and a questioning of what is actually, he calls it the fatal judgment, which of course it was, because it's a judicial execution, it's a judicial homicide. The date of the publication of this book was actually, I think, earlier this year. I haven't got the exact date, but in 2022. But I think it's an important book to read. It's the true story, it says, of the 1920s murder mystery. It's got a lot of little quotes. Immersive and compelling. A page turner. Well, looking at it, it is, because it's quite easy to read if you go through it. I have to say I didn't come away from this with any particularly strong views. I didn't like Major Armstrong at all as a person. He wasn't a particularly attractive person from what I could see, but whether he was actually a murderer is another matter. And it's interesting here because there's actually a photograph. You can see the photograph of him in the dock giving evidence. This was before the law was changed, so that you could actually photograph people in the dock. However, it's worth reading, and as I've said before, the legal profession, I have to say, does not come out of this well. When you look at the way in which the case was handled, the expert evidence and everything else, I'm not going to criticise anyone because I think it's extremely difficult in history to start comparing what happened 100 years ago, the way we do things today, and what will happen in 100 years' time. The only good thing, in my view, is that we don't execute people, and we still maintain the basic principle that you're innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, so that the jury are satisfied that they're sure. The problem with this case, which is the same with every case, whether you're a juror or whether you're a professional or even just someone watching the case, is you can see that there's some evidence which probably should be there. The jurors perhaps would like to have asked for it, or we would like to have asked for certain evidence which wasn't forthcoming. And you can only therefore arrive at a verdict on the basis of what's put before you. And of course that can, as was proved in this case, to be fatal. But as I've said, he wouldn't have been executed today even if he had been convicted of something. And I still believe, looking at it, that they never got up to the standard of proof required. Anyway, it's a great read. Thank you to Stephen very much indeed, and I hope the sales are very good. And then we'll talk about the Hay Poisoner in another review. Thank you. Bye-bye.